ADHD mental health chat. It's on something I think is kind of important. I'd say it's pretty important. We're going to talk about a bunch of words that you guys hear me say when we talk about ADHD, and we're going to define them. We're going to define some words because we talk about a lot of stuff with ADHD, you know? We use a lot of phrasing and a lot of things we say. So I want you guys to know what the words mean, and feel free to ask questions if you want more information, because I have a lot of them. So I'm going to not breeze through them, but I'm definitely going to move through them a little quickly. So if you guys have questions or have contributions of things that you've experienced or kind of want to talk about anything else deeper, feel free to ask questions because we love questions in here. Let's kick it off with the first thing is ADHD. Yeah, we're gonna define ADHD. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's got a deceptive name because it makes it sound like we have a deficit of attention. We don't. We actually can't not pay attention to a lot of things. We can't shut our attention off, and it's one of the biggest confusing things about ADHD is the name is deceptive. It gives you a deceptive idea of what is happening. And that's all right, you know? Maybe someday they'll come up with a better name for it. But for right now, we got to deal with the name we're given. Got to deal with it. It used to be referred to as ADD. A lot of people still sometimes refer to it as ADD, but ADD has been removed. They've taken ADD out. It's just attention deficit disorder. They've removed that, and it's all categorized under ADHD now. And the reason it changed, and what they changed about it, they broke ADHD into 3 categories. That's why they removed ADD. So the first one, and it's another word we're going to talk about, is inattentive ADHD. What would you rename ADHD to give it a more accurate name? Hyperacute sensory disorder. Hyperacute sensory disorder, I think, is what I would call it. Because your senses are very acute, you're very perceptive, you see, hear, smell everything around you all the time, and you can't shut it off. But the first one's inattentive. So inattentive ADHD is what used to be referred to as ADD because they didn't think it had a hyperactive component. But what they found is that the hyperactivity actually takes place internally. That's what inattentive is. A lot of times that hyperactivity takes place inside the body as opposed to externally. The second type, which is another word we're going to define, is the hyperactivity, hyperactive. So ADHD has a category that's hyperactive as well. That's what people have diagnosed as what you see. Like you see someone who bounces their leg or clicks their pen or talks a mile a minute. That is that hyperactive component of ADHD. And then the third one is combined type. And so combined type means you got a little bit of this and a little bit of that going on together. I am diagnosed with combined type, but that is ADHD under an umbrella, and a nice little definition for you guys of what that looks like and what that is. ¿Por qué no los dos? Yeah, exactly. Why not both? You can have both. Combined type. Next definition we're going to do is ASD. You ever hear me refer to ASD? Autism spectrum disorder. And so there's a lot of times people have ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. It's written out like this sometimes. That usually is a sign that someone is dealing with both autism and ADHD. So if you ever see someone write that, that's usually what they're referring to. But it is another neurospicy, another neurodiverse category of people. And ADHD and autism both take place on a spectrum. So it's kind of a spectrum-based thing. It can be on one end or the other, where it might be more severe or less severe. It's kind of interesting. And you can have both, not exclusive. Next thing we're going to talk about is stimulant. We're going to talk about stimulant. So there's a lot of stimulants. Most of our medications are stimulants for people with ADHD. A lot of them are stimulants. So your Adderalls, your Ritalins, those are stimulant medications. Those are designed to pump extra dopamine essentially into your brain, and it helps regulate and pay attention and be able to focus on things because you have that stimulant medication. There's also things like caffeine that are stimulants. Things that give you that bump. And that's why we don't always react the same way other people react to caffeine. A lot of times we react differently to caffeine than other people. Sometimes we hear people with ADHD say caffeine makes them sleepy. Like they could drink a bunch of caffeine and take a nap. And that's totally legitimate because that's how our brain works. Your own dopamine store-bought is just as good. Yeah, exactly. Nothing like a little nap after a coffee. Yeah, and people are like, how can you do that? Like, how is that even possible? And it's because it's a stimulant. It's essentially it sounds like, I don't want you guys to ever think that caffeine's a medication, but it's like our medication where it stimulates us. And when we're stimulated, it gives us the ability to focus. If we can focus, a lot of times it slows our brain down and we can calmly kind of lull into sleep. Non-stimulants. So there are lots of non-stimulant medications for ADHD as well. The challenge with stimulants versus non-stimulants, stimulant medication is fast acting, it acts quick, and then when it goes out of your system, it's gone. You take your medicine in the morning, it's in your system. When it's done, it's out of your system. Non-stimulant medication, more similar to like anxiety or depression medication, where you have to take it for a while before you're going to start to see an impact. And then when you're done taking it, it's going to take it a little bit of time to get out of your system. Not an immediate reaction and then an immediate stop. It's closer to like you have to take it for like a month and then you'll kind of see results. And then when you stop taking it, you'll see kind of a wean off effect. It's kind of interesting. That's what non-stimulant medications are for us. Executive function essentially describes our cognitive processing ability. And that ability to go through the steps of like planning, to actually plan and execute and monitor success for executive goals. It can affect your daily life a lot. And it's something that we struggle with as people with ADHD. It's those things where you can like make a plan, follow through with the plan, reflect on results. A lot of times we don't have that ability. And it causes a lot of other issues. But for the most part, it's our ability to like compartmentalize and like put things away in our head. Can't always put things where they're supposed to go. And a lot of times things get lost, just like how we do in real life. Yeah, executive function's a challenge for us. We struggle with that. And it's okay. Like when you understand that that's a struggle for you, it affects planning, decision-making, error correction and troubleshooting, dangerous or technical difficult situations. I mean, there's a lot of things executive function impacts, and that's just something we struggle with. The next one I have is working memory. This is kind of interesting. So I have a very easy comparison for working memory for you guys. Working memory, it's essentially like the RAM in your computer. For those of you guys who know what RAM in a computer does, it's your ability to process a certain amount of things or a certain amount of information at a time. And so processing that information is your working memory. And essentially the ability to store and process that information like on a hard drive is the executive function. And so we struggle with both those things. We struggle with our working memory, like our capacity, because we want to and pay attention to and have so many ideas at a time. It's hard for us to pick which things get filed, and so nothing ends up filed. So working memory is a big struggle for us. So you'll hear me talk about working memory. Comorbidity is the next word that I'm going to define for you guys. Comorbidity is 2 or more diagnoses that come along with your core diagnosis. So with ADHD, there's a lot of comorbidities that come along with that. Sometimes it's dyslexia, sometimes it's depression, sometimes it's anxiety. There's so many comorbidities that come along with ADHD that you have to make sure when you have your assessment that you're open and honest with your psychologist so they can figure out all the facets of what's going on with you. Because there's a lot of things that happen, and unless you're looking at the whole picture, it's hard to diagnose correctly and get things correctly done. So comorbidity is essentially those things that come along with ADHD that you have to be perceptive of because you don't want to miss them. Because somebody growing up with dyslexia may have ADHD. That may be the core of their diagnosis, and that's where their dyslexia comes. But they may also just have dyslexia. That's totally possible as well.